Check this out, Kate. This is actually my daughter's headset. This is mine. Mine is $29.95. Hers is $350.
Good for her.
Okay, Greg, you're cute.
Welcome, everyone. It is 6:01 on Monday night. You're listening to the 132nd installment of the Age Out Angels Radio Hour on www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. I'm your host, Greg Rapport. I'm the founder and executive director of Age Out Angels. We're a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Age Out Angels provides one-to-one mentors to vulnerable youth for the purpose of coordinating the care and services that they need to survive. We try to help young people avoid some of the horrible pitfalls that they're likely to face when they don't have a proper safety net. And this program is brought to you every week at the same time, courtesy of Doc G, William Saunders, Ruben Rodriguez, and all the fine people here at Hamilton Radio who allow us to use this airtime. Ruben is on the big board tonight. Robin is producing from the den. So good to see you both. And thank you so much at home for tuning in. We've put together what I hope you will find to be an insightful and compelling view of the child welfare system. So get ready, because our guest tonight is a very special lady named Kate Woods. She's the Director of Operations for Legal Assistance of Western New York, and she's going to talk with us about representation for the parents when a family is torn apart by a child welfare crisis. I promise you'll be looking at child welfare from another angle, perhaps one you hadn't considered prior to tonight, and you will find Kate's area of law to be more than worthy of your consideration. On the other side of the interview, and my final words tonight, if we get there, because I love talking to Kate, I need to talk about the census, though, so we'll see if we have time for that, but I do have some things I need to tell you about the census. So stay with Hamilton Radio all night long for a combination of great music and talk. I believe the Rome brothers will be talking sports after our show, so be sure to stick around for that. Now, please take a moment, if you're watching us on Facebook, and hit that share button, or even better, email your whole address book and tell them to go to www.hamiltonradio.net Channel 2. Tell everyone in your world what we're talking about tonight, because what you're going to hear applies to every geographic region, including where you live, and this needs to be shared. In fact, this is actually the third of 4 consecutive programs examining different aspects of foster care. Next week, August 31st, Johanna Greason and Sarah Wash from the University of Pennsylvania will be talking about their most current research projects. Johanna is doing foster youth during the COVID, and Sarah is doing foster to college. And then after that, we're taking a week off. But hey, don't keep this private to yourself, all right? Help us share it. Tell your friends. There's a generation of youth out there being forgotten, and caring people can't sit still while that happens. So be sure to tune in every Monday at 6 p.m. for our unfiltered look at the child welfare system and other related community services. This is where you come to get the whole truth. And I promise what you will hear tonight cannot be found on the nightly news. And since we're live, you can talk to us during the show. You can write in the comments field on Facebook. If you want to join the conversation, if you're feeling brave, you're welcome to do that. Be a part of the show. 609-807-2492. I know it's easy to write in Facebook, but then you think about talking on the show, you get cold feet, and that's okay. But if you feel like it, join us. 609-807-2492. I promise we don't bite. And by the way, I just want to say, and I say this at the beginning of every show, if you are in crisis, I want you to do me one favor. If you are feeling like you're walking right up to the edge right now, do me one favor, please, and don't hesitate to call a free mental health hotline. These resources are available to anyone at any time, and they exist to help you connect with the right support when you need help. I think lots of times, people end up feeling that way, and they call somebody who did them bad in the first place. call one of these helplines. There are people there who understand what you're going through. So if you're thinking about harming yourself, don't hesitate to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And that number is 1-800-273-8255. And if you look at my Facebook page, we post a bunch of these different numbers for specific areas, including a helpline for people who are victims of human trafficking. So please, please, please just make that one call. And you won't be sorry that you did. Now, I want to tell all my friends in New Jersey about the Bridges to Employment program. This is available to any foster youth in New Jersey. If you or someone you know is currently in foster care or aged out up to age 24, doesn't have a job, not in school, basically languishing, right? Like what could go wrong, huh? This is a perfect program. We'll provide all the supports you need to get your high school equivalency if you need it. And if you don't need your high school equivalency, we'll give you extra help to brush up your skills, get you moving towards a career where you can live independently. This is the best, most comprehensive program I've seen since the 1970s. So honestly, I believe this comes along once in a generation. And not only is it all free, but you can actually earn up to $1,000 in incentives as you progress on your way to success. Call 609-306-0821 for more information, or email directly to me at greg@ageoutangels.org, or hit me up in the comments field on Facebook, or private message me, or send a carrier pigeon. There's 100 ways to get in touch with me. If this program is right for you, don't miss out on it. Now, to tonight's subject. Interesting article. Amid pandemic, Congress considers giving parents more time to reunify with kids in foster care. This is an article written by a gentleman named Michael Fitzgerald. Before getting her 3 children back from New Jersey's foster care system in 2017, Aisha Hammond spent years hustling to make court-ordered classes and programs for parents, therapy, regular court dates. She's seen firsthand when those efforts fall short. In fact, she's second generation. Her mother had her parental rights terminated when Hammonds was around 10. And her first view of government authorities telling her mother that you're a bad parent and removing her mother's child. Now helping other impoverished parents accused of child abuse and neglect in and around the Newark, New Jersey area, Hammond said the current global public health crisis and related social strife have made strict legal timelines to reunify with children in foster care almost impossible to meet. She quotes, "Everything was hard before the pandemic, so how can it be any easier now with COVID," said Hammonds, who works as a parent ally with Legal Services of New Jersey. It's unrealistic what they're asking for and the timelines that they're asking for. Weighing such concerns, a bill now before Congress would suspend deadlines for child welfare agencies across the country to seek termination of parental rights. Current federal law says that if children have been in foster care for 15 of the past 22 months, while parents don't meet requirements to reunify, agencies should move to permanently sever their custody rights. Parents who cannot convince the court that they're making enough progress on things like drug testing, counseling, or attending domestic violence classes stand to lose their children to adoption or relatives. Yet during the pandemic, many court order services that have been severely limited, restricting parents' ability to address issues that have landed them in family or dependency court. COVID-19 has created uncertainty for many, causing millions to face housing, health, food, and job insecurity, according to Wisconsin Representatives Gwen Moore, who announced Friday introducing the Protecting Families in the Time of COVID-19 Act. This unprecedented crisis should not lead to permanent damage to families because of a federal timeline created before the pandemic. In June, citing the significant stress that the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting national public health emergency has placed on the child welfare system, the U.S. Administration for Children and Families issued strongly worded guidance recommending that social services agencies take a more cautious approach to federal timelines. I cannot emphasize how strongly I urge agencies to carefully consider whether it is appropriate to terminate a parent's rights during a pandemic, stated Associate Commissioner of the Federal Children's Bureau, Jerry Milner. Given the social shutdowns, limits on family visits, and in-person services have made it virtually impossible for a parent to have an opportunity to achieve goals related to reunification requirements. Milner has called on child welfare agencies to more carefully evaluate the current challenges before taking the final step of terminating parental rights. But legal observers say many jurisdictions haven't acted on that advice. And on that happy note, let me say hello to our guest tonight, Kate Woods. Kate, welcome to the Age Out Angels Radio Hour.
Thanks, Greg.
It's good to have you here. And, before we get started at all, we need to give a shout out to Nicole Kilberg, because if it wasn't for her, I would never have met you, and what a loss that would be. So, Nicole, if you're listening, please know that we love you. Okay. Kate is the Director of Operations for Legal Assistance of Western New York. And I really think we should start by telling people what that means.
Well, Director of Operations is not particularly relevant to our conversation today, but in terms of my job at Legal Assistance, I do a lot of things, but the aspect of my job that I think is most important and that I like talking about and that I want to talk about here is that I am an attorney, and I represent parents in family court who are accused of neglecting or abusing their children. And I operate solely on an assigned counsel basis. So these are people who I'm assigned to, just like I'm like a public defender, but in family court, essentially.
Okay. Tell us what Article 10 is.
So, every state in the country has its own set of laws that control child welfare cases. And in New York, where I practice, it's Article 10 of the Family Court Act. So when I say Article 10, I'm talking about the types of cases that I handle. So it's abuse cases, neglect cases, termination of parental rights cases are under a slightly different area of law, but this is the shorthand for it, for those types of things. Article 10.
Excellent. So is the mood shifting? It seems to me from where I sit that there is at least a kind of a sense that when you remove a child from a family, you're laying an extra level of trauma onto that child. And that reunification is more important now than it was, say, I don't know, a year or two ago.
Do you mean among people thinking about these things, or among the people who are living them and experiencing them and working in them every day? Because I can tell you my experience as a practitioner is I feel that way every day. There's no shift for me. I think maybe if we're talking about the sort of the zeitgeist, are people sort of more tuned in now to the fact that this is a horrific rupture that affects generations? Yes, I would say that's true.
Well, see, it's sort of the people who make the decisions that affect these things, right? Are judges moving towards the biological family or?
No.
No,
I think that, and I'll admit that I have strong opinions and I'm maybe a little bit cynical, but in my experience, people will pay lip service to the child welfare system as wanting it to be just, air quotes, just for people who are just listening. But in the actual practice of it, in the day-to-day reality of it, no. Judges, I lose almost every case I have. And that's not because I should. Uh-huh.
Well, now see, those of us who are lay people or who are just listening to the show and trying to learn, don't know. We're not exposed to what you're exposed to. We don't get it in the regular news. It's just not part of our discourse. So what happens exactly? A case gets opened because somebody says something to someone at DCF or something, right? A neighbor, somebody says, hey, there's a child in the hallway who's dirty.
Sure.
Or I hear screaming in the apartment next door, right?
Yeah, it can be any number of things.
Right. Okay, so then a case gets opened, and then what happens after that call is made?
With the caveat that I can only speak with specificity to New York, but I have a feeling it probably is functions similar everywhere. Whatever agency is charged with handling these matters is obligated to investigate. In New York, they have 60 days to complete an investigation. So a caseworker is sent out to the house. They talk with everyone. Usually it's a really dehumanizing experience for whoever's been had the call made on them. They come in, they look in your fridge, they, makes all sorts of judgments about how you live. They take notes about it. And then they decide if there was any merit to the complaint, right? Is this actionable? Was it substantiated? That in and of itself won't land you in court, though. So you're not going to be my client just because you had CPS called on you. You're going to be my client if it's either that the substance of that one call was very serious, and they decide they want to remove your child or children, or if there's been like a series of issues with CPS and they finally get fed up and they haul you into court.
So is there a middle ground there? Is there a place where they might say, okay, like this family might be pretty dysfunctional, but they could use a little help. Let's get them a counselor, for example, or a mommy and me trainer.
So I'm going to say no.
You're laughing at me.
I'm going to say no. I don't, like in my experience, no. They will make overtures to offering help and assistance. But it's not actually useful for people. I mean, in my experience, agencies are much more quick to just say, let's just remove the kids. That's better. This is the safer option. It's less work, all sorts of things. But no, I don't see, there are very rarely situations in my biased defense attorney experience. There are very rare situations where I feel that the child welfare agency is actually invested in preserving a family.
And isn't that sort of what the Family First Prevention Act is supposed to shift that whole balance towards?
Yeah, and there've been historically there've been moments, probably not as sharp as the ones we find ourselves in now, but there've been moments where these discussions have happened. We need to approach things holistically. We need to preserve family bonds. We need to push towards reunification. All of these things, but it doesn't actually. In my experience, it doesn't actually end up playing out that way in the local jurisdictions because these are old patterns. These are ingrained in us.
It was actually an old joke that when a politician is losing ground, he just stands up and says, "Who wants to save the children?" And everybody goes, "Yay, we do." And now suddenly, he's got his base back. Before we go on, I just want to say hi to Gavin and David Sachs and Kelly Toller's listening to the show tonight. Stanley Swan joined us. And it's so good to have you all aboard. So how does it get to the place where you end up meeting these families in a courtroom situation?
Well, it's going to be that a petition has been filed accusing them of either abuse or neglect. I can tell you anecdotally, abuse cases are pretty rare. Overwhelmingly, what I'm dealing with are child neglect matters. So basically, it's when a parent has been charged with neglect. And there's all sorts of specific ways to plead that, meaning elements that have to be shown or whatever in the context of a petition. But that's what lands you in court. And generally, what happens before that, because New York allows CPS agencies to remove children before they've even filed a petition, which is generally what they do. So even before there's a petition pending, they will have gone to court, asked the judge if they can remove the child. They remove the child, and then the law in New York says within 3 days, the parents then have a right to be in front of a judge, have that matter heard. We're off to the races with a neglect matter, and those cases can last for at least a year, often more.
So, all right. So when a child is removed from a home, is the petition part of that automatic?
Yeah. So yes, they're required to file a petition within 3 days after the removal process has taken place. Pre-petition removal is supposed to be reserved only for really serious situations where they just don't have time to draft a petition. And that doesn't seem to be reflective of reality in my experience of it, but that's sort of the justification for it.
Mm-hmm. Does the parents, you meet them early in this process, right? They have 3 days and they're in court to answer these charges. Yes.
Is that early in the process? I mean, we're talking about probably several contacts they've had with CPS at that point, where they've maybe been encouraged to disclose things to caseworkers. They often go to court at the removal hearing if they know about it on their own without an attorney.
Oh my.
Yeah, like it's concerning, right? It sounds scary. Probably not something anyone would want to experience.
Well, a lawyer wouldn't go to court without an attorney. So, how could a layperson possibly think they could make their way through?
Well, they aren't given the option. It's not as if the parent is like, a lawyer, I'll pass.
They're not told it's available, right?
Right. Well, you have in New York, you have an absolute right to counsel in these cases, but how that functions in reality is different. You go into court. Always seems to be a Friday afternoon when these things happen. Everyone just wants to get out of there and enjoy their weekend. The judge just says, we're just going to get through this. We'll get you your lawyer. Let's just hurry it up. I think parents often have no idea what's happening when they find themselves in these situations. It's terrifying.
I was going to say, they must be scared out of their wits.
Of course.
Like when it actually happens. Probably before, as they're walking in, they're thinking, oh, we'll just get through this. But then all of a sudden it's the moment of truth and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle themselves in that kind of a situation. So in order to get you, what do they have to do?
So the judge just assigns them me or my agency because we have a contract with the county and so we're assigned. Or if it's in a jurisdiction where there's a public defender office, the public defender will be assigned. And then the court sends over information to us about the person and we call them and then we go from there.
And time passes and the children are not with their biological family at this point.
Correct. It's rare for you to be able to have a child return to their parents with any sort of quickness in these cases.
Right. I do need to pause for 1 second, Kate, and give a big shout out to Paul Sansone Jr. and his auto mall on Route 66 in Neptune, New Jersey, and the new Sansone Jr.'s Windsor Nissan 590 US 130 East Windsor, New Jersey. Paul, as you may recall, is one of our favorite guys in the whole wide world because he gave a car to one of our foster alumni in need. So if you're looking for a car in Neptune, it's amazing to actually give a child a car. It's a beautiful thing. If you're looking for a car in Neptune or East Windsor, New Jersey, or anywhere near those towns, please check him out and tell them you heard about it right here on the Age Out Angels Radio Hour. Whenever you can, remember to support the businesses who support the people. So visit Sansone Jr. on Route 66 in Neptune and the new Sansone Jr.'s Windsor Nissan 590 US 130 East Windsor, New Jersey. Now, we got a question came in, Kate, that says, "What early on in this, you said that you rarely win in court. What did you mean when you said you rarely win in court?"
Yeah, well, I have to redefine victory for myself every day. That means that it's rare that I have a case where I can successfully argue against the allegations that have been made against my client and have a judge say, cool, I'm going to dismiss this petition. It's almost always the case that we're forced to make some kind of concession, agree to something, or that we lose a trial. And it's not because I'm a bad lawyer. It's because the system's bad, right?
Well, so you're in a situation where you are answering on behalf of the parents who are charged with neglect most of the time. Is there a racial thing here we need to take account for? Like, are you seeing, more people of color or anything like that we need to be aware of?
There's absolutely a racial component of this, and that's going to depend on where you. I mean, I work primarily in a rural area where it's like the demographics aren't going to necessarily show that, but in more urban areas, sure. But like that, I think is not really the issue, because when we talk about neglect, we're really talking about like the material conditions of people's lives. So I would say actually the biggest factor to keep your eye on in these cases is class. I think that these types of cases are a pretty ugly iteration of classism. The only people who lose their kids are poor people. And those are really the questions we should be asking ourselves, like, why is that? And I think if you focus your attention there, I think that's going to probably take you on some interesting journeys in terms of thinking about how we structure things.
This affects your thinking, doesn't it? This pervades your thoughts when you're trying to help people.
Yeah.
This notion that if you're more poor, you have a better chance of losing your kids. But when you meet these parents, do you see in your dialogue with them why their children were taken away, or do you see in your dialogue with them that their children shouldn't have been taken away? Like, what's the feeling you get when you interview these guys?
Well, I mean, so there's like on a case by case basis, there's sort of, I mean, yeah, I've had some, like, there's a reason why we have a child welfare system. And I've had some cases that I thought it was the appropriate thing for children to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not every case. And it's certainly not every case where there's been a removal. And that's actually, I would say, far fewer. But what I think about when I'm talking to my clients in these cases is I think about how they are denied so many basic aspects of their own humanity, and how horrific it is to be poor in this country and to need to ask for help, and then to have the same agencies that you're required to go to for help be the ones that turn around and take your kids, because that's how this works, at least in New York. And the thousands of indignities that you have to suffer every day just because of where you find yourself on either side of the socioeconomic divide. There's like this whole idea of like a right to privacy that doesn't exist for poor people. And this like extends to like your kids, right? Because I have kids. And if anyone presumed to tell me how to parent them or that I wasn't parenting them well enough, I'd be livid. But like that doesn't necessarily exist for poor people. Like, it's like if you spend any time in like the waiting room of a social services agency, you'll see like, give us all your personal information, tell us your business. God forbid you live in a small town, because then everyone's going to know everyone anyway, and they're going to have opinions about your family and, oh, you're from that group or whatever. I mean, I think all roads lead to family court in terms of our societal demons. We'll find them in these cases. And that, I think, is the conversation I wish people would have more, is what does this say about our values and particularly about how we think about poverty and people struggling with it, and what our obligations are to those families. Because I'll tell you right now, this country doesn't think poor families are worth protecting. Not one bit.
And I have to tell you, I've been in sort of those simulations, and even as a simulation, living life where every dollar means something can add to the stress level in unbelievable ways. I mean, just one problem, and we all have a zillion problems, but one problem can set these folks back in ways. And I've also read stories about people who are hungry, who are afraid to go to food banks for just the reason that you're saying, which is that once you go to the food bank, then all of a sudden you're exposing yourself to the fact that you can't feed your children. And by doing so, can be setting yourself up for the kind of thing that you're describing. Now, what those of us who are listening to this show are probably most familiar with in courts is what we see on television, which is where it's just like, move it, get it through, next. The court is overloaded. Let's get through this. I've already made up my mind, so shut up and just let me bang the gavel and rule. Is that really what it's like, or is that just drama?
So I think definitely the pace of it, like when we're talking just about, here's our court appearance for the day we're going into court. There's often very little conversation. It's a lot of, okay, you're here. Kids are staying in care. See you in 6 months. I make a point of talking a lot in court. I make a lot of noise. I will admit to having a bit of an attitude in court, because sometimes that's all I can give my clients. But yeah, it's very much like an assembly line. Everything is rubber stamped. Yep, we get it. We hear what you're saying, parents, but we're going to stay the course here. It's really frustrating. So the experience of the individual court appearance is like very much like a hurried, like, we don't really care what you have to say. But then the case itself drags on forever. So you have like a year and a half of these pointless appearances where nothing really happens. And you're just slowly devolving, because when will this end?
So once the child is actually removed, that sets into process a kind of a timeline, right? And where then how long is it till I could get my kids back?
Yeah.
So how long is it?
Well,
give me a date.
Yeah, right. I think sometimes the answer is we're just going to wait you out, and it's going to be never, because we know if we wait 15 months, we can just terminate your rights, which is what we wanted to do from the beginning.
Oh, okay. By the way, Lorraine Wilkerson has joined listening to the show tonight. She's the chairperson of the Child Placement Advisory Council for New Jersey. So we're glad to have you on the show tonight. And Kelly asked the same question I was thinking. Kelly, you and I have minds that think identical. Because, when we talk about abuse and neglect, right? It's one thing to not have food in your house. But things like substance abuse, alcoholism, stuff, those are sort of, in my mind at least, you can tell me why I'm wrong, I can take it. But in my mind at least, these are sort of like separate issues. If a child lives in a house where there's extreme drug abuse and alcoholism, there's no way to sugarcoat that.
I'm gonna say again, and look, yeah, having a substance abuse issue is bad. But if we think about this in terms of class, yet again, there are certain substance abuse issues that we are perfectly fine with, and we would never take someone's kids over, right? I'm thinking about suburban moms who pop Xanax all day and drink a bottle of wine. CPS isn't knocking on their door, right?
Yeah.
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 So,
There's. Yeah.
Like if you live in a trailer and you have a heroin addiction, that's bad. But that's not really what we're talking about here, is it?
But if you're in suburbia and you're getting OxyContin by prescription, that's just fine, huh?
Well, and the way I see this is substance abuse issues are symptoms of a larger issue, which is people have completely lost any sense of their own future. Like when you live in poverty, like what do you have? It's been made abundantly clear to you your life doesn't matter. Is it that much of a surprise that people are going to turn to those kind of things? No. Is it surprising that the opioid epidemic is hitting rural, economically depressed areas much harder than other areas? No. So we can think about them in sort of isolated, atomized ways, but I think that's wrong. The issue here is that people can't have their basic needs met so they can live good lives.
Yeah. Well, I see this in children who are in and aging out of the foster care system, where they will look me in the eye and I'll ask them, can you pass a drug test when we're talking about employment? And they'll say to me, well, I'm not going to go without weed. And I think, well, geez, that's probably going to be legal in about a year. It just happens it isn't right now. But how much am I supposed to blame an 18-year-old who's been through absolute hell, who just needs to self-anesthetize? It sort of doesn't surprise me. But the question is, does that play a large part in your cases? Do you see it frequently?
Sure. Yeah. And it'll depend on, there's contextual issues with this. I don't think, and I've seen the shift, right? Probably 5 years ago, someone using marijuana would have been you would get raised eyebrows. That's not so much the case now. Unless you have someone who's particularly frustrated with your client and they want to make a point or whatever. That can still come up in frustrating ways. But yeah, there's a lot of substance abuse that happens. It's an element of cases. I find it's really frustrating because another part that's really difficult for parents to deal with is they're then put into this machine where they have to do all these appointments, right? So it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, so now you're going to need to go to meetings about substance abuse 5 days a week. You have to do, your day treatment for this. You need to go to job training. You need to get a job. You need to find an apartment. So it just becomes completely overwhelming. I don't know how someone's supposed to maintain sobriety in that sort of situation. I think people are set up to fail.
So stressful, yes. In simulations I've been in, I've sort of faced what you're describing. And even though it was a simulation, I felt the stress because in addition to that, it's also possible that you'll get a letter that says your electricity is about to be shut off or your water, or you're about to be evicted from your apartment. It's this the program that you need to go to 5 days a week doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No.
There are other aspects of your own poverty and life circumstance that you have to deal with. But yet, if substance abuse is your issue, am I correct that you have no hope of getting your kids back unless you test clean for a number of weeks, months, however long?
Yes, that's true. I mean, you're going to need to go through a program and, have some demonstrated sobriety, definitely.
I mean, there's just no way. Before we go further, I need to thank all the people who made donations to Age Out Angels this week. We thank you so very much for your generosity. Hey, if you have an employee giving fund or matching gifts foundation associated with your place of work, we would certainly appreciate your contacting us and telling us how we can participate in that. Private message me on Facebook or email to greg@ageoutangels.org. And I want to remind everyone that you can donate to Age Out Angels every time you make a purchase from Amazon. And I know you're spending money like water on Amazon, so all you have to do is designate Age Out Angels to be your Amazon Smile designee. And a portion of your payment will go to us without it costing you 1 penny more. I can make it easy for you to designate Age Out Angels as your Amazon Smile recipient. And all you have to do is contact me either via Facebook or directly at greg@ageoutangels.org. And I can send you a link that will take you directly to our designation. So, Kate, we have 10 minutes. Can you tell us some like real life stories?
Yeah.
What are cases that captured your imagination?
That haunt my dreams
Or
and nightmares. Yeah, that's
Right.
probably more accurate. I love what I do, but it's difficult. And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. Well, I had one case that ended up going all the way up to the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York, where I argued it. I won unanimously. Thank you very much.
Yay!
Yeah.
Applauding.
And I think about that client a lot. She will every once in a while call me still. But she was very young, very young mother. She, her daughter was taken from her when her daughter was 7 days old. And I think it was the nurses in the hospital that called it in on her because she has type 1 diabetes. She wasn't handling it well. She didn't have a great support network, as a lot of young people, especially kids that are aging out, find themselves in that. She also had been in and out of foster care when she was younger. And that case dragged on for years and years and years. And her daughter went from being a baby to being 3. And I remember one appearance I had with her where we were just talking through, trying to there's like a million dumb details of okay, well, you have to do this today and we got to do that thing. And then you need to sign this. And she just wasn't listening to me at all. And I could just tell. And I was like, hey, check in with me. And she's just like, I can't sleep. All I can think about is my daughter. I just can't sleep at all. And it's one thing to say that, is another thing to experience someone saying that to you. So I'm telling you guys that this is what she said, but I just will never forget that. It was a really, it was just one of those things that really stays with you. And then, when I had my own kids and I even had more of a way to attach a feeling to that. I think about that a lot. And I also think about how did it end up? Yeah. She never did get her kid back. How's that? Even though I was able to find some success in terms of the point of law that I was arguing. And I was very successful in that case, as a lawyer. She was never going to get her kid back. I mean, it's this is one person, a 22-year-old who has nothing against the awesome power of the state. Who's going to win?
So
not her.
So at 15 months, if the biological parent doesn't meet the requirements set by the court, then the child welfare agency can just step in and terminate the parent's rights?
Yeah, it's a new proceeding. So it's not as if there's just your rights are terminated. They, parents have, at least in New York, a right to a hearing on that issue, and they can litigate that. But I will tell you, what is also the law in New York is that if a parent exercises their absolute right to a hearing and they lose, they are foreclosed from having any contact with their child ever again. And so what they do is they leverage that to get parents to agree to adoptions, so then they can have 4 visits a year, which they won't get.
So some type of an open adoption thing where they can actually see their kid at some point. But what do you mean they won't get?
They will refuse any contact.
But the court papers say they get 4 contacts a year, right?
Not if you, that's if we have a consent adoption.
Right.
But if you actually say, no, I'm not going to agree to this, you need to prove it in court. I want a trial.
Mm-hmm.
You have your trial, you lose, and the court terminates your rights anyway, then you don't get to have any contact. So basically they punish parents by refusing to submit to this.
So that would be designed. That would be, what's the word I'm looking for here? Leveraging, and there's probably a better word than leveraging, stronger, more criminal word than leveraging, but it's forcing parents to choose between never seeing their kid again or having extremely limited access. That's like horrible.
It is. It's horrific. And I've had to do that. It's awful. Yeah, it's the law. And it, it functions very well for its purpose, meaning that most people don't, they cave and they say, fine, I'm not going to try this.
Yeah. Well, it's like fighting City Hall, right? After a while, you feel like, no, I just can't. It's too big. It's too strong.
That's exactly what it is.
Let me take what I can get. Absolutely. I know a lot of I'll say girls, because they're, 15, 16, 17 years old, who have babies, and they have babies for all the wrong reasons, but not to them. To them, they're having babies for very, very sincere reasons. Their motivations are really heartfelt. Young ladies will look at me and I'll say, why are you having a baby? And they'll say, because I want someone to love, and I want someone to love me. And they'll vow, I will never let what happened to me happen to this child. And then, of course, that child is cute when it's a baby. But then, of course, as a parent that the years 8 months through 28 are the tough years. And they're not equipped, to deal with them. So in New York State, are there any kind of supports that are available? Not hammers on their heads, but just supports, things that will help these people.
There are. They're not generally functions of the government. I mean, there are maybe, sort of nonprofit groups or like other sort of organizations that their core mission is to support people in this way. But that's not coming from the government, in my experience.
Right. Yeah, I'm putting together a mommy whispering group right now, as a matter of fact, because I'm realizing, how the need for that is there. And especially these girls who want to try to improve themselves, like you want to be a single mother, but you also like want to go to school and have a part-time job, just keep building the stress on top of stress. And you need someone who's been there to kind of help guide you through. So where's this all headed? Kate, what's the answer here?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm just a lawyer, so I don't know.
I'm just a simple country lawyer.
That's right. That's what I am. I hope that we can move towards a more humane child welfare system that permits people to be seen in their totality and takes into account the fact that, what we're talking about here are families that should be protected. And maybe that's the value shift, right? I would like to see families that are struggling with poverty be just as important as any other family. I think that's the fix. I mean, I have like on a personal level, there are things I would suggest that I'm not going to suggest here. But I think maybe we need to rearrange our own thoughts about how we think about these cases, because in my experience, a lot of people, when they learn what I do, it's, how could you do that? Those people are awful parents. They shouldn't have their kids. It's like, actually, they're doing the best they can in a framework that is set up to make them lose. So why don't we change that framework? Why don't we just help people? I don't know. That seems easy, right?
How do you keep your chin up?
It's hard. So I mentioned earlier, like I sort of reframe victory for myself a lot. I have a lot of clients who have found points of success in their lives, and I celebrate that with them. As people who, I mean, like some people do get their kids back, and that's amazing. That sort of ability to I don't do that. I don't do it for them, but to walk with them while they navigate that system and they maintain like their sanity, and then they're able to get their kid back. That's really powerful. So I just need a few of those, and that can keep me going for a while.
Yeah, that's like a home run.
Yeah, but also like these are important things to talk about, even outside of like the child protective context. I think people need to be talking more about particularly issues of class, like all the time. And I like talking about that stuff. So, I get a charge out of that. But I like being mean to government attorneys in court. So I do.
Okay, so you get your kicks one way or another, huh?
That's right.
I do need to say a few things about the census before we log out tonight, because I've actually been doing it for a couple of weeks in some hard to count areas. And I got to tell you, I met some really, really nice people. It's kind of amazing how, but I've also met some really strange people. And it's actually given me a wonderfully expansive view beyond the little cocoon I've created for myself in the last 5 months. You meet a few nice people, and it really reaffirms like a positive view of humanity, people who will invite you into their homes, even though we're not allowed to go in, or offer me a cold drink on a hot day, even though I'm not allowed to take it. It's the gesture, that makes life pleasant. And there's a certain elegance that goes with politeness. But I've also seen another interesting side of life. Folks who have created these little backwoods oases for themselves where they don't really want to be bothered by people, and especially not by government. And I got to tell you that people have a right to want to drop out. I'm not judging that. It's as valid as any other way to live. So please don't think that I'm condemning it. But you have to understand that we're all still part of a larger whole, and things like voting and the census and the police department and the school and the post office bind us all together, even if you've sworn to never belong to any club that would have you as a member. So here's the rub. The census has its rewards built in. The census is where the numbers for the House of Representatives is analyzed. The census has to do with how your schools and senior centers are funded. One lady asked me really snidely, she said, "What will they do to me if I just refuse it?" And I said, well, nothing, because the punishment is built in. You risk weakening your representation in Congress. You risk weakening your education system. If you want higher taxes, then you can feel free to ignore the census, and that'll show them that you won't be pushed around. And the thing is, see, it's not just your education system, it's everyone's. By not answering the census, you punish yourself and everyone around you. We all lose when you aren't counted. So for those of you who get some measure of joy by running us off your property, please believe me when I tell you, we just as soon not have to visit you. We just as soon not wreck our car tires driving 1.5 miles down a dirt road to get to your 1/4 mile gravel driveway, where we know you have 3 guard dogs and 12 guns and who knows what else to compensate for your teeny weeny peeny. You act so tough, but to us, it just looks like you're scared of everything. And people have said things to me like, I don't want to tell you my name or my birth date. And what they don't realize is you don't have to say your name. I could actually write person 1 or person 2. I don't even have to be there. You could have answered this online or with your telephone. Your birth date isn't that important because they aren't going to send you a cake. But it would be nice to know everyone's age so we know if the federal money should go to a school or a senior center. This is deep state stuff, folks. Are you starting to feel me? This is a population count, not the deep state trying to sell your babies into a pedophilia conspiracy. The funniest thing is that by being rude to us, you act as though you've single-handedly fought off the government. But really, all you've done is made some poor schmo who drew the unlucky straw and was forced to visit you pity you for being your own worst enemy. You didn't strike a blow for independence. You're not a patriot. You're not a hero. You're just somebody who makes everyone's life around you a little more difficult for absolutely zero gain. So if you're one of those people who rejected the census, Just stop. Recognize the difference between a real intrusion and a custom that has been around since 1790 that exists for your benefit. If you want to rail against something, let's rail together, man. Let's rail against the Patriot Act. You don't want to tell me your birthday, but it's okay with you if the government can listen into your phone calls. We could join together on that. We all have plenty of things to be worried about. Life is tough, but believe me when I tell you, radio hosts with clipboards isn't one of them. I just want to say thank you very much to my guest, Kate Woods. Thanks to our engineer, Ruben. Music provided by Angel Fire. Looking forward to seeing you all next week. In fact, let's make a date to meet right back here at 6 o'clock next Monday, August 31st. It'll be our last show of the summer. My guests will be Johanna Greason and Sarah Wash from the University of Penn, talking about their research projects, foster youth during the COVID and foster to college. Stay healthy, everyone. Wear masks. Let's make this week the best week ever. Good night, everybody. Good night, Kate.
Bye, Greg.